My name is Denise Monroe. I'm 43 years old. Last month, my parents walked uninvited into an art gallery at Boston University's Fay G. Joe Art Center. They hadn't called me in 6 years. Not when my husband died, not when I was left raising a nonverbal autistic son by myself. Not once. But the moment my son's painting sold at auction for $2.8 million, they suddenly remembered they had a daughter. They arrived smiling, polished, composed, expecting reconciliation. A photograph, maybe even a quiet share of the money. A chance to stand beside the prodigy grandson they had never bothered to know. What they didn't realize was that I had prepared something for that night. A dedication, a public acknowledgement, a permanent record of who showed up and who didn't. And when the curator read those words aloud in front of their colleagues, donors, and friends, the silence that followed was heavier than anything I could have said myself. To understand why that silence mattered, we have to go back 7 years. July 16th, 2018. I was shelving returns at the Maplewood Public Library, where I worked part-time. It was an ordinary morning, the kind that feels forgettable. Reshelving biographies, checking in overdue cookbooks, making small talk with Mrs. Patel about her grandson's Little League game. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. Michael. I almost ignored it. He knew I wasn't allowed to take personal calls during my shift, but the second buzz came immediately after the first. Urgent, insistent. I stepped into the break room. Denise, I need you to come home. Now. His voice was shaking. Michael never shook. What's wrong? Is Ethan okay? Ethan's fine. I need you here. I found him on the bathroom floor 20 minutes later. The towel pressed against his side was soaked through with something that wasn't water. Riverside Medical Center, room 4C. Green vinyl chairs that squeaked when you shifted your weight. Ethan sat in the hallway, organizing the spare hospital bracelet a nurse had handed him. First alphabetically, then by the color of the ink. Order was how he made sense of chaos. Dr. Melissa Grant didn't soften it. The imaging shows a mass on the pancreas. Given its size and location, we're looking at stage 4. She paused. Not for drama, but because there was no gentle way to finish that sentence. At this point, we're discussing palliative treatment, chemotherapy to extend time, manage pain. But you need to understand, we're talking months, not years. Michael squeezed my hand so tightly my fingers went numb. How many? I asked. 6, maybe less. I'm so sorry. Ethan was 12. He had already withdrawn from speaking to anyone outside our immediate family. He understood the world through color, texture, repetition. Routine was safety, and now I had to find a way to tell him his father was dying. I didn't know how. I still don't know if I ever did. The billing coordinator intercepted us on our way out. We can arrange a payment plan, she said gently. But the first infusion requires $5,600 up front. Insurance covers 80%. Your portion is due by Friday. Michael was a public high school history teacher. He earned $58,000 a year. I made $31,000, working part-time at the library. We had $4,112 in our checking account. That night, for the first time in 15 years, I called my parents to ask for help. The last time had been right after college, a security deposit on my first apartment. They'd sent the check with a handwritten note. This is the last time. We raised you to be self-sufficient. My father answered on the 4th ring. Cable news murmured in the background. Dad, it's me. Michael's sick. Cancer. We need help with the medical bills. Silence, then calm and measured. Your mother and I are in a critical season right now. My manuscript goes to print this year. I'm on sabbatical. Every moment counts. Surely Michael's parents can contribute. They're retired, Dad. They live on a fixed income. A sigh. Denise, this is an opportunity for you to demonstrate the resilience we worked so hard to instill in you. You're capable. You'll figure it out. He hung up before I could tell him we'd already maxed out a credit card during the ER visit. Before I could tell him, I was terrified. Michael's parents lived on $46,000 a year between Social Security and a modest pension. It was 11:34 p.m. Michael was downstairs, nauseous from his first round of chemo. Ethan was asleep, his seashell collection arranged in perfect gradient order above his bed. And my father had just informed me, politely, academically, that I was on my own. Michael went back to work on September 4th. If I stop teaching, he said quietly, then I'm just a dying man. Michael told me he needed to be more than a patient for Ethan. He said, if I'm going to leave him, I can't leave him remembering me as just a hospital bed. He kept teaching at Brookfield High School. 4 classes, 87 students, U.S. History, AP Government, 2 sections of World Civilizations. Not one of those teenagers knew their teacher was living on borrowed time. On infusion days, he drafted lesson plans from a hospital recliner. He graded essays while anti-nausea medication blurred his vision. By October, he couldn't stand through a full period. He brought a stool to the front of the classroom and joked about getting old. By November, he couldn't drive. I switched to early morning shifts at the library, picked him up at 2:30 p.m., brought him home so he could sleep 3 hours before Ethan's bus arrived. The school quietly began discussing substitutes. We tried not to. Ethan was 12, level 2 autism, which meant he needed structure, predictability, support. He had been mostly nonverbal since he was 4. He could speak, when he felt safe, just not to teachers, not to therapists, not to strangers. He never asked about the hospital, never asked why his father slept so much, but he knew. One morning in November, I walked into the kitchen and found him lining up Michael's medications across the counter. 47 prescription bottles. Pain, nausea, anxiety, supplements the oncologist said might help. Ethan had arranged them by color, darkest to lightest. Ethan, what are you doing? He didn't look at me. Dad's colors are changing, he said softly. They used to be blue and green. Now they're gray and brown. He experienced emotion as color. His art therapist had explained it years ago. Sounds had texture for him. Feelings had shades. Grief had gradients. And somehow, through a spectrum only he could see, he was tracking his father's decline. The therapist told me Ethan was processing loss the only way he knew how. I often wondered if he understood what was happening better than I did. December 28th. Michael felt strong enough that morning to suggest a walk, just the 3 of us, down to the Charles River Esplanade. It was 19 degrees, the kind of cold that burns your lungs. Ethan wore his blue parka, the one with the hood he could pull tight when the wind became too loud. Michael moved slowly, one hand gripping my arm, the other reaching for Ethan's. We watched the sun sink at 4:46 p.m., streaks of orange and violet bleeding into the winter sky. Michael lowered himself to Ethan's height. It took nearly a full minute. Ethan, he said quietly, when I'm gone, I need you to protect your colors. Don't let anyone tell you they're wrong. Don't let anyone convince you the way you see the world is broken. He paused, steadying his breath. It's not broken. It's yours. Ethan didn't respond. He just stared at the horizon, but his hand tightened around his father's, and he didn't let go the entire walk home. Michael cried on the way back. Ethan pretended not to notice. He always did when emotions became too loud. But his hand never released him. I think about that walk all the time. The last time the three of us were simply us. On January 8th, Michael's parents showed up without warning. Linda knocked at the door at 11 p.m., holding 2 casserole dishes and an overnight bag. "We're here," she said, "for as long as you need." They made space in the living room. Thomas took the couch. Linda slept in the recliner. Hospice nurses came every 2 hours, checking vitals, adjusting morphine. At 4:29 a.m. on January 9th, 2019, the breathing stopped. Ethan was asleep in the next room. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Michael's left hand. Thomas stood at the foot of the bed. Linda's hand rested on my shoulder. My parents hadn't called in 3 months, but it was my in-laws who held me when my husband took his final breath. The funeral was set for January 14th. Thomas and Linda offered their home immediately. "You can't stay here," Linda said gently, glancing around our 2-bedroom rental. 6 years of memories, now heavy with medical equipment and grief. "Come stay with us. We'll figure everything else out later." I almost said yes, but their house was small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, and part of me still believed I needed my parents. I needed the people who raised me to show up and tell me I wasn't alone. So instead of packing a suitcase, I sent an email. Subject: housing request. "Mom and Dad, Michael is gone. Ethan and I need family right now. Can we stay with you for 6 months while I figure things out? I know this is a lot to ask, but I don't know where else to turn." I sent it at 11:34 p.m. on January 11th. The red receipt came back at 7:02 a.m. on January 12th. The reply arrived at 9:15 a.m. The subject line read, housing request. I still keep that email printed in a folder in my desk drawer. Sometimes I take it out just to remind myself I didn't imagine the tone. It began, "Dear Denise, your mother and I have discussed your situation carefully. While we sympathize with your loss, we believe this moment presents an opportunity for you to demonstrate the resilience and independence we worked to instill throughout your upbringing." He went on to explain that he was on academic leave, finishing his manuscript under contract with a university press. My mother was preparing a major exhibition at the museum. These commitments, he wrote, could not be postponed. He added that they had made a significant financial investment in my brother Daniel's startup venture. Their resources were fully committed for the foreseeable future. He suggested that Michael's parents were better positioned to provide immediate support, as it was their loss as well. "We trust you will navigate this challenge with the strength of character we have always seen in you. Jonathan Monroe, PhD-CC. Evelyn Monroe, 241 words, signed with his credentials. Not Dad, not love, not even sincerely. There was no mention of Ethan, no acknowledgement of their grandson who had just lost his father. No, we're sorry. No, we wish we could help. Just a formally written rejection copied to my mother, who apparently had nothing to add. I read it 3 times. Then I called Thomas. "We're on our way," he said, before I had finished explaining. They arrived 2 hours later. Thomas carried boxes from his truck, extra linens, a small space heater for the spare room. Linda began packing up our kitchen. "Your family," Thomas said when I tried to thank him. Family doesn't turn away family. Their house was on Willow Street in Quincy, about 900 square feet, built in the early 1950s. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen barely large enough for 2 people. They had paid off the mortgage years earlier after decades of payments. They gave us the master bedroom, and moved themselves into the enclosed back porch where the windows rattled in the wind and the heat barely worked. They lived on roughly $46,000 a year. Thomas's postal pension and Linda's small income from selling handmade quilts online. I arrived with medical debt and a grieving autistic child whose routines had just been shattered. They didn't hesitate. Not once. Ethan had meltdowns almost every other day during the first month. New house, new sounds, new smells. The neighbor's dog barked every morning at 6:18, and Ethan couldn't handle the unpredictability. He would cover his ears and rock in the corner until the barking stopped. Thomas built him a shelf unit with 8 color-coded bins: seashells in blue, smooth stones in gray, bottle caps sorted by size in green. Linda created a small sensory corner in the living room: a weighted blanket, noise-canceling headphones, a basket of fidget tools she bought herself. "Ethan needs predictability," she told me one morning while setting breakfast on the table. "If we keep breakfast at 7:15 and his things in the same place, he'll adjust." By March, the meltdowns had dropped to twice a week. By April, Ethan had started arranging Thomas's mail by envelope color when it came through the slot. Thomas never complained. Not when Ethan paced the hallway at 2 a.m., not when he had a meltdown in the grocery store, not when I gave Thomas and Linda $850 each month for groceries and utilities. I sent $325 a month toward the medical debt, which totaled $47,920 after insurance and Michael's modest life insurance payout covered what they could. By April, the balance had dropped to $46,220. Thomas refused to take anything more. "We don't need rent, Denise. We're managing." They weren't managing. Not really. I learned much later, years later, that they had been skipping their own medications to stretch the budget. That Linda stopped going to her annual checkups because the copay felt too high. That Thomas had quietly taken out a small personal loan to cover overdue property taxes. They never told me. Never asked for help. They just kept showing up. Kept setting breakfast at 7:15. Kept building shelves for Ethan. In June, the library offered me a full-time position with benefits. I turned it down. Ethan's special education bus dropped him off at 3 p.m. He needed me home. He needed consistency, routine, stability. Some things matter more than a salary. Linda had been selling handmade quilts online for about 3 years. She earned roughly $900 a month, enough to cover supplies and a little extra. We spent a Saturday staging them, draping them over the porch railing with the harbor in the background, laying them across a vintage chair Thomas had found at a yard sale, arranging them in soft, natural light. The new photos went live Monday. By Friday, she had sold 3 quilts. By the end of May, she had sold 24, a record. Her monthly revenue jumped from about $900 to nearly $1,800. "You have an eye for this," Linda said, scrolling through her shop statistics. "These look like gallery pieces." Thomas started picking up weekend handyman work, fixing decks, replacing fence panels, installing shelves, bringing in an extra $400 or $500 some months. None of us said it out loud, but we all knew what was happening. We were carrying each other, filling the gaps, making it work because we had to. Because that's what family does. In September, the school counselor emailed me. Subject: Concerns about Ethan. "Mrs. Monroe, Ethan has been drawing during every free period, before class, at lunch, in the resource room. The images are very dark, heavy in black and brown tones, with chaotic patterns. Has something occurred at home we should be aware of?" I stared at the message for a long time. Something had occurred. His father had died. I had told the school back in February. They sent a condolence card, offered counseling. Ethan refused to speak to the counselor, so the follow-up stopped. Now they were concerned because he was drawing. I wanted to reply, "He's grieving the only way he knows how. Please let him." Instead, I wrote, "Thank you for your concern. We are working with his therapist. Please continue allowing him access to art materials." Since Michael's death, Ethan had filled 14 sketchbooks. Black, brown, gray, chaotic swirls. No recognizable shapes, just grief translated into motion. One evening in September, Linda found one left open on the kitchen table, page 47. "Denise, come look at this." It was different. Not chaotic, layered, deliberate. Blue-green along the edges, fading through subtle gradients into gray-brown at the center. "I think this is Michael," she whispered. There was no face, no figure, nothing literal, but it was him. The exact color progression Ethan had described months earlier. Blue and green shifting slowly into gray and brown. He had painted his father's fading in color. And somehow, in turning grief into gradients, he had created something undeniably beautiful. That night, after Ethan went to bed, Linda looked at Thomas and said softly, "What if this isn't just therapy? What if he's actually gifted?" She had been reading about art therapy for autistic children, about savant artists, about neurodivergent painters who perceived the world in ways most people couldn't. In October, she used her own savings to buy Ethan a real canvas, 16 by 20 inches, and a basic set of acrylic paints from an art supply store in Boston. Total cost? $52. She set the canvas on the kitchen table with a small note beside it. No rules, just paint. Ethan stood in front of the blank white surface for 20 minutes. Then he made the first mark. When he did, he didn't stop for 6 hours. I used my staff privileges at the library to check out the maximum allowed, 50 books at a time. Rothko's late works, Kandinsky's compositions, critical studies on abstract expressionism, color theory textbooks meant for graduate students. Ethan treated them like manuals. He would sit cross-legged on the living room floor, the books spread in a careful semicircle, first arranged by cover color, then by size, then by subject. One afternoon, in one of his rare, unprompted moments of speech, he looked up and said, "Mom, Rothko saw music. I see feelings. Is that the same?" I paused. "I think that might be better," I told him. After the third cycle of returns, the children's librarian pulled me aside. "Your son is checking out graduate-level art theory. How old is he?" 13. She blinked. "Remarkable." Every 3 weeks, I returned 50 books and checked out 50 more. Ethan absorbed them. He didn't imitate techniques. He couldn't follow step-by-step instructions. Direct demands triggered his shutdown reflex. But he internalized the ideas, let them filter through whatever neurological pathway turned emotion into color in his mind. And then he painted. March 2020. The world shut down. For most people, it was chaos. For Ethan, it was structure. No school, no unpredictable social pressure, no fluorescent lights, no cafeteria noise. Just home, just routine, just art. He watched YouTube tutorials for hours, abstract layering techniques, color blending, texture building. Between March and June, he filled 12 sketchbooks. One day, I stumbled across a comment he had left under a video. "This technique helps me paint what sadness looks like. Thank you." The creator had replied, "Please share your work. I'd love to see it." Ethan never did. He wasn't painting for an audience. He painted because he needed to. the way other people need sleep. Thomas built him an easel from scrap lumber he had saved from a job site. He sanded it smooth and stained it a warm honey tone. When Ethan saw it, he cried. It was only the third time I had seen him cry since Michael died. He didn't say thank you. He rarely used those exact words. Instead, he traced the wood grain with his fingertips, slowly, reverently, before placing his first real canvas onto it. That painting, 18 by 24 inches, still hangs in my bedroom. Supplies were expensive. Professional acrylics ran between $14 and $20 per tube. Canvases ranged from $18 to $45, depending on size. Brushes, mediums, sealants. It added up quickly. I reduced my monthly medical debt payment from $325 to $125 and redirected the extra $200 into Ethan's art fund. Thomas began scanning clearance bins at a local art supply store in Cambridge. One Saturday, he came home triumphant, holding 12 tubes of professional-grade acrylic he'd found discounted to $68. "Colors he doesn't even have yet," he said, grinning. By December 2020, Ethan had completed 8 finished paintings. We stacked them carefully in the master bedroom, the room he and I now shared. Thomas and Linda had given up that space without complaint. Some nights, I would wake at 2 a.m. and find Ethan sitting on the floor, quietly studying the paintings, rearranging them according to what he called emotional temperature. I didn't understand the system, but I trusted it. March 13th, 2021. The Copley Square Farmers Market. Linda suggested renting a booth. The fee was $30. We displayed 6 of Ethan's paintings on a folding table beside stacks of her quilts. I sat in a metal chair, trying not to hope too loudly. At 11:30 a.m., a woman stopped. She looked to be in her early 70s, silver hair twisted into a loose bun, paint-stained jeans, a long wool coat. She stood in front of Ethan's paintings for a full minute without speaking. Then she crouched down in front of him. He was sitting on the pavement, arranging smooth stones he'd collected from the parking lot. "Who painted these?" she asked gently. Ethan didn't answer. Eye contact with strangers was still too much. "My son did," I said. "They're his." She looked back at the canvases, studying them again. "I'm Claire Donovan," she said finally. "I used to paint in New York, stopped 20 years ago. But these," she gestured toward the paintings, "these remind me why I started." She pulled a business card from her coat pocket and wrote her personal number on the back. "I don't teach," she said. "I witness. If your son would allow me to witness him paint, I would be honored." Ethan didn't look up, but his hands stopped moving. He was listening. Claire's studio was in a converted warehouse in Somerville, with tall, north-facing windows and concrete floors. Thursdays. 2 to 5, she told me when I called that night. "No charge, no expectations. If he wants to paint, he paints. If he wants to sit and stare at a blank wall for 3 hours, that's fine," Claire had said. "I'm not doing this for him. I'm doing it for me. Your son reminded me what art is supposed to feel like." Thomas drove Ethan to the studio every Thursday. Linda packed snacks, carefully chosen ones, fruit pouches, string cheese, pretzels sealed tight in a bag so they wouldn't go stale. Textures mattered. Too much crunch, too much moisture, too much unpredictability could tip the balance. Sometimes I wondered if my parents even knew what foods Ethan could tolerate, if they had ever asked about his routines, his sensory triggers, his world. But I already knew the answer. The first card arrived in December 2019. A pre-printed holiday message wishing us peace in the new year. Printed signatures, Jonathan and Evelyn Monroe. No handwritten note. No mention of Michael. No acknowledgement that their daughter had buried her husband less than a year earlier. No question about their grandson. Just a generic card, likely purchased from the museum gift shop where my mother worked. I put it in a drawer. Another card came in 2020. Same design, same printed names. A third in 2021. In 2022, no card came at all. I didn't even notice until February, and when I realized it, I felt nothing. They had made their choice. So had I. I never blocked them on social media. I probably should have. But some part of me, the part that still remembered being their daughter, kept checking. My father's book was published in May 2021. Civic Discourse in a Fragmented Age, hardcover, $36.99. In the acknowledgments, he thanked my brother Daniel for his intellectual curiosity that strengthens our family legacy. I received one line. And to Denise, for her early encouragement. Early encouragement. As if I had proofread a draft and then quietly disappeared. Daniel got a paragraph. I got erased. Ethan didn't exist at all. My mother curated major exhibitions at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. I saw press releases, newspaper interviews, photographs from charity galas tagged online. Not once did she mention having a grandson. Not once did she acknowledge that her daughter was raising an autistic child alone. They had full, public, celebrated lives. We simply weren't part of them. July 19th, 2022, 2:34 p.m. I took Ethan to the Museum of Fine Arts. Local residents had free admission on Friday afternoons. He loved the European gallery, the symmetry of the frames, the spacing, the predictability of the layout. I was standing in front of a Monet when I saw her. My mother. About 40 feet away, speaking with a colleague. Our eyes met. 3 seconds, I counted. Then she turned toward the man beside her and laughed at something he said. She didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge me at all. I stood there holding Ethan's hand. He was 16 now, nonverbal in public, stimming quietly with the museum map, folding and unfolding it along the same crease. She never looked back. November 2022. Ethan's first group show at a small contemporary gallery in Cambridge. His piece, Gradient Number 7, sold for $400. Thomas and Linda framed the check. Not because we needed the money, but because someone had believed in their grandson enough to pay for his work. I drafted a message to my parents. Your grandson has a painting in a real gallery. Thought you might want to know. I deleted it. In May 2023, a Boston gallery, Harborlight Contemporary, offered Ethan representation, a 3-year contract. The owner, Margaret Hale, had one condition. Ethan must retain full control. No forced commissions, no hard deadlines, no pressure. She looked at me steadily. If this is going to work, we respect his process. For the first time, someone outside our family understood that his talent wasn't separate from his wiring. It was because of it. September 2024. The Northeast Emerging Artist Award. Prize amount, $18,000. Ethan didn't attend the ceremony at the Institute of Contemporary Art in Boston. 340 guests. Speeches. Applause. Flash photography. It would have been sensory overload. Thomas and Linda went in his place, dressed in their best. Thomas wore the same suit jacket he'd owned for decades. Linda wore a navy dress she had sewn herself. When Ethan's name was announced, they walked to the stage together. Our grandson is an extraordinary artist, Thomas said into the microphone, his voice trembling. And we're honored to be his family. The audience applauded. Local papers covered it, the Boston Globe's art section, a regional arts magazine. My parents' friends must have seen the headlines. They never called. 5 years. Not one phone call. Not one visit. Not one, "How is Ethan doing?" Just silence. And somewhere in that silence, I realized I no longer needed them to care. I had stopped waiting. Margaret Hale had been running Harbor Light Contemporary for over 30 years. She had represented artists who later showed in major museums, whose work sold well into 6 figures. The first time she saw Ethan's paintings, pieces Claire had submitted quietly without telling us, she called me directly. "I need to meet him." "He doesn't do meetings," I explained. "If he feels pressured, he shuts down." "Then I won't pressure him," she said. "I'll come to him." She drove to Somerville in May 2023 and met Ethan in Claire's studio. She didn't ask him to explain his work, didn't ask him to justify it. She stood silently for nearly 20 minutes, studying the canvases. Then she turned to me. "I've been in this industry for 3 decades, she said. "I've never seen this level of color depth from anyone, let alone a 17-year-old. I would like to represent him." The contract included one clause that mattered more than all the others. The artist retains the right to decline any commission, deadline, or exhibition requirement without penalty. Margaret understood. Some artists thrive under deadlines. Ethan needed space. In June 2024, Claire submitted Ethan's portfolio to the Northeast Emerging Artist Award. She didn't tell him. She didn't tell me. "If he knows there's a deadline, he'll freeze," she admitted later. So I did it quietly. The notification arrived in September. Ethan Monroe had won $18,000. The ceremony was scheduled for September 21st. "I can't," he said simply when I told him. "Too many people. Too much noise. Just tell me what color the room is after." Thomas and Linda attended in his place. I watched a recording later that a friend had sent. They looked proud. Not polite pride, not performative pride, radiant pride. And as I watched them stand under those gallery lights, I thought about my parents, and I felt nothing but calm. In January 2025, Ethan began a new painting, 72 by 96 inches, museum scale. Mixed media, acrylic, oil pastel, charcoal. Layers built slowly over months. He worked on it for 3 or 4 hours a day, never rushed, never forced. Claire counted the layers, 119 translucent applications of color, each thin enough to allow the previous one to breathe beneath it. The materials alone cost nearly $950. In August, Ethan stepped back and set down his brush. "This is what it looked like when Dad's colors stopped," he told Claire quietly. She covered her mouth and cried. "This belongs in a museum," she whispered. "But first, it needs to be seen." Margaret agreed. "I'm calling Hamilton and Pierce Fine Art Auctions," she said. "They'll understand what this is." A producer from NPR's All Things Considered contacted the gallery. "We'd like to feature Ethan Monroe, the autistic artist who paints emotion. Would he be willing to do an interview?" "He doesn't do interviews," Margaret said. "But you can speak to his mother." They sent a reporter to Massachusetts. We sat in Claire's studio for 90 minutes. I talked about Michael, about grief, about color. The segment aired on a Thursday evening, 7 minutes, over 2 million listeners. By Friday morning, Margaret called. "The auction house is interested," she said. "They're talking 6 figures. A week later, the formal estimate arrived, $200,000 to $240,000. Thomas stared at the paperwork as if it were written in another language. "Denise, that's more than our house cost." Ethan stood quietly in the gallery, looking at the painting under professional lighting. "It means Dad's goodbye is worth something," he said, and I knew he wasn't talking about money. Hamilton and Pierce set the auction date for October 28, 2025 in Boston. Their specialists examined the painting for nearly 2 hours. They photographed it, analyzed the layering, documented the texture. "This is museum-level work," the lead specialist said. "The story will attract bidders. Autistic teenager paints the emotional spectrum of his father's death. Synesthetic perception confirmed by neurologists." He paused, studying the surface. "But beyond the narrative, the technique stands on its own." And for the first time, the world was beginning to see what we had seen all along. "We're very confident in the $200,000 to $240,000 range," the specialist said. "Lot number 52, contemporary evening sale." I signed the consignment agreement. Thomas squeezed my shoulder. "Denise, even at the low estimate, that's life-changing." I thought about the medical debt, about the small house on Willow Street they had given up half of, about 6 years of showing up every single day without hesitation. "Yes," I said quietly, "it is." And I already knew exactly what I would do with it. October 28th, 6 a.m. Ethan refused to get out of bed. "I can't go," he said. "Too many people, too much noise. You go. Tell me what color the room is after." I had expected this. PDA plus a ballroom filled with hundreds of strangers? Impossible. "Claire will stay with you," I told him. "We'll FaceTime when it's over." Thomas wore the same suit jacket from the awards ceremony. Linda wore a navy dress and a simple pearl necklace, real pearls, the only valuable heirloom she owned. We left at noon for the drive into Boston, Hamilton and Pierce Fine Art Auctions, Back Bay. The sale began at 7 p.m. Ethan's lot was scheduled for 8:20. I was so anxious I couldn't eat. "Whatever happens," Linda said softly in the car, holding my hand, "we are already proud. This is already a miracle." I thought about my father's email. Demonstrate resilience. I thought about my mother turning away in the museum, and I thought, you have no idea what's coming. 340 registered bidders. Some seated in rows of velvet chairs, some on phones, some bidding online. We were in the third row. I could see Ethan's painting under the spotlight. 72 by 96 inches, the layers glowing. At 8:17 p.m., 3 minutes early, the auctioneer stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, Lot 52, What Remains of Color by Ethan Monroe. Mixed media on canvas, executed 2025. He paused. "Many of you know the story. A 19-year-old artist with autism painting the emotional spectrum of his father's passing. But I urge you to look beyond the narrative. 119 layers, museum-level technique. This is work that will endure." The introduction was meant to last 30 seconds. He spoke for nearly 3 minutes. The room was silent. "We'll open at $160,000. A paddle lifted immediately. 160. Do I hear 180? Yes, 180. 200. 220. The numbers climbed fast. 250. 275. 300. At 300,000, I stopped breathing. 350. 400. Thomas gripped my hand. "Denise, that's 450. 500,000. A murmur rippled through the room. The auctioneer didn't slow. 550 to phone bidder 18. 600 online. 650. We had blown past the estimate in under a minute. 800. 900. 1 million to phone bidder. Linda began to cry. At one point, 3 million, only 2 bidders remained, a phone line and an online paddle. The auctioneer slowed the cadence. 1.8 million. Do I hear 1.9? Yes, 1.9. 2 million. The room held its breath. 2.2. 2.4. Each increment now $100,000. 2.6. Thomas's hand was shaking. 2.8 million, the online bidder countered. Silence. 6 long seconds. The auctioneer scanned the room. 2.8 million going once? He waited. Going twice? Still nothing. Sold to the online bidder for $8 million. The gavel struck at 8:26 p.m. The room erupted. Applause, flashbulbs, standing ovation. I collapsed into Linda's arms. Thomas was trembling so hard he had to sit down. At 8:29, my phone buzzed. Mom calling. I stepped outside onto Newbury Street. Traffic, horns, cold night air. "Denise," she said breathlessly, "we just saw the news. We had no idea Ethan was this talented. We'd love to see you. Can we meet?" Her voice shook. Through the auction house window, I could see Thomas and Linda being photographed with Margaret and the auction staff. The people who had raised this artist, the people who had stayed. "I'll think about it," I said, and I hung up. I didn't call back. November 2nd, our financial advisor walked us through the numbers. Auction commission, 25% of the hammer price, $700,000. Federal capital gains tax at 15%, approximately $315,000. Massachusetts state tax, about $140,000. Total remaining after fees and taxes, $1,645,000. She slid a worksheet across the desk. "That's life-changing money," she said. "What are your priorities?" I didn't hesitate. I already knew. First priority, the medical debt. After 6 years of paying $125 a month, there was $8,200 left, the final remainder of what Michael's death had cost us. Over the years, part of the balance had been reduced through a hospital hardship review, which helped more than we expected. I paid it in full on November 3rd. No more monthly reminders. No more quiet wait. Second priority was something I discovered by accident. Thomas and Linda had told me their mortgage was paid off in 2004. That was true. What they hadn't told me was that in 2019, they had taken out a home equity loan for $23,400 to cover overdue property taxes and emergency repairs they couldn't afford at the time. They had been paying it quietly for 6 years, never mentioned it, never asked for help. I paid it off without telling them. The bank mailed the confirmation letter to their address. "Congratulations! Your loan account ending in 4721 has been paid in full." Thomas called me in tears. "Denise, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," I said. "You gave us a home. I'm giving you freedom." On November 5th, I called a realtor. "I'm looking for a house, coastal Massachusetts, 3 bedrooms minimum, and a separate studio building. Budget up to $800,000. She found it in 2 days. 14 Harbor Lane, 3 miles from Willow Street, from the small house where we rebuilt our lives. Craftsman style. 2,200 square feet. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, built in 2019. And behind it, an 850-square-foot detached studio. North-facing windows, climate-controlled, 12-foot ceilings, perfect for painting. "It's listed at $710,000, the realtor said. I'll take it. Cash offer. We closed on November 10th. I didn't tell Thomas and Linda yet. On November 11th, I met with an attorney. I want to establish a scholarship fund, I said. Initial endowment, $500,000. The principal will remain invested. Annual returns will fund 5 $25,000 scholarships for neurodivergent students pursuing visual arts. Sustainable, long-term, he drafted the documents. The Thomas and Linda Whitaker Foundation for Neurodivergent Arts, filed November 12th, 501C3, status pending. Board of Directors: Thomas Whitaker, Chair; Linda Whitaker, Secretary; Denise Monroe, Treasurer; Claire Donovan, Advisory Member. First scholarships to be awarded Fall 2026. Structured as an endowed fund, designed to grow, not disappear. It would give opportunity to children like Ethan, children whose brilliance doesn't always fit inside traditional systems. And Thomas and Linda's names would be on it forever. Not my parents' names. Not the people who built careers on public philanthropy while privately withdrawing from their own family. The ones who stayed would be remembered. On November 15th, Ethan began spending extra hours at Claire's studio, working on something he refused to show anyone. "This one isn't for selling," he told me. "This one is for saying thank you." He wouldn't let me see it. Wouldn't let Claire photograph it. He worked in private for 6 weeks. On November 20th, Claire texted, "You need to see this, today." I drove to the studio. Ethan stood in front of his easel, hands streaked with paint. The canvas was 48 by 60 inches, not a traditional portrait, no faces, no bodies. 2 abstract forms, overlapping, built from layers of warm browns, soft golds, steady blues, colors that felt like safety, like home. "I don't paint what people look like," Ethan said quietly. "I paint what they feel like. Grandpa and Grandma feel like home." I started crying before he finished the sentence. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Not just because of the technique, though the technique was there, but because my son had painted love itself, and he had painted it for the people who had earned it. The next day, Dr. Melissa Harding from the University of Massachusetts called the gallery. "We're launching a permanent exhibition titled Families of Care. We would be honored to display this piece as the centerpiece." "It's not for sale," Margaret said. "We're not purchasing," Dr. Harding replied. "We're asking for a donation, full tax deduction, permanent display. The artist retains naming rights." That night, I asked Ethan, "Can they have it?" He thought for a long time, then nodded. "But the plaque has to say, 'Thank you for being my family.'" Dr. Harding agreed immediately. December 14th, 2025, 6 p.m., opening reception. 200 invitations sent. Local press, arts community, educators, civic leaders. As standard protocol, notable figures were invited. My parents' names were on the list. Dr. Harding called to confirm. "Should we remove Jonathan and Evelyn Monroe?" "No," I said. "Leave them on." I wanted them there. I wanted them to see. Thanksgiving, November 27th. 7 people crowded into 980 square feet. Me, Ethan, Thomas, Linda, Claire, Margaret, Mrs. Patterson from next door who brought a pie, a folding table in the dining room, a turkey that cost $46. It was perfect. "Next year we'll have room for a proper table," Linda said, arranging mismatched chairs. "But this year, this is enough." Ethan sat between Thomas and Linda, not the grandparents he shared blood with, the ones who earned the title. My phone buzzed all day. 9:14 a.m. Happy Thanksgiving, Denise. We'd love to see you. 2:47 p.m. Please call me. 6:33 p.m. We made a mistake. 8 messages, all from my mother, unread. The last one came at 9:18 p.m. Your father wants to apologize. Please give us a chance. I turned my phone off. Thomas noticed. He didn't say a word. He just squeezed my hand across the table. December 1st, 9 a.m. Thomas, Linda, come take a walk with me. We haven't even had breakfast yet, Thomas said, confused. Humor me. It was 34 degrees, light snow drifting down. We walked along Harbor Lane, about 3 miles from Willow Street. We stopped in front of 14 Harbor Lane. A realtor stood on the porch, Jennifer Chen, holding a folder and a set of keys. What's going on? Linda asked. Jennifer smiled gently. Mr. and Mrs. Whitaker, welcome to your new home. She placed the keys in Thomas's hand. I don't understand, he said. It's yours, I told them. Paid in full. The deed is in your names. This is your house. Linda's knees buckled. She sat down on the porch steps, covering her face. Thomas stared at the keys as if they might vanish. Denise, we can't. This is too much. You gave us a bedroom when you barely had space yourselves. You gave us 6 years. This isn't too much. It's overdue. We walked inside. Hardwood floors, updated kitchen, a master suite with a walk-in closet and private bath, a bedroom for Ethan, a guest room, and the studio. 850 square feet, 12-foot ceilings, wide north-facing windows, climate-controlled, temperature and humidity regulated for artwork. Above it, a small 400-square-foot apartment, a quiet space for Ethan whenever he needed solitude. Linda stepped into the studio and broke down completely. We gave you a spare room, she sobbed. You gave us a palace. You gave us a home, I said softly. This is just a building. Then I pulled the incorporation papers from my bag. There's one more thing. I handed Thomas the documents. The Thomas and Linda Whitaker Foundation for Neurodivergent Arts. Board of Directors. Thomas Whitaker, Chair. Linda Whitaker, Secretary. Denise Monroe, Treasurer. Claire Donovan, Advisor. Mission: to provide 5 $25,000 annual scholarships to neurodivergent students pursuing visual arts, funded through a permanent endowment structure. Thomas read his name, then Linda's. A mail carrier, he whispered, on a foundation board. No, I said. A grandfather who showed up every single day. That's who you are. He cried. Linda cried. I cried. When we told Ethan later, he carefully sorted the foundation documents by paper color and said, now more kids can paint their feelings. That was enough. University of Massachusetts Art Gallery, December 14th, 5:50 p.m. The reception began at 6. Ethan stayed home with Claire. 200 people is 200 different noise colors, he had said. I'll look at the pictures later. I understood. We walked in together. Me, Thomas, Linda, Margaret. My parents were already seated in the front row. 6:12 p.m. Dr. Melissa Harding stepped to the podium. Tonight, we unveil the centerpiece of Families of Care, an exhibition honoring those who show up, who sacrifice, who love without condition. The curtain fell. The painting glowed under the gallery lights, warm browns, steady blues, soft golds layered into something that felt like safety itself. Below it, a small brass plaque. Dr. Harding read aloud, Love in Abstract Form, Portrait of Thomas and Linda Whitaker by Ethan Monroe, 2025. Thank you for being my family when I needed one most. The room went completely silent. Then the applause came, long, sustained. I watched my mother's face drain of color. Dr. Harding continued, "This portrait honors two grandparents who opened their home and their hearts to their grandson and daughter-in-law during their darkest chapter. They did not have excess wealth. They gave something greater, constancy. This is what family looks like. Not simply blood, not obligation, but choice. Showing up, sacrifice." Dr. Harding used the word family 7 times in that speech. She said sacrifice 4. The cameras shifted toward Thomas and Linda. Thomas in his 30-year-old suit jacket, Linda in the dress she had sewn herself. One of my father's colleagues, a professor from Boston College, leaned in and whispered something to him. My father's jaw tightened. At 6:25 p.m., Dr. Harding added one more announcement. "We are also honored to partner with the Thomas and Linda Whitaker Foundation for Neurodivergent Arts. This foundation will provide 5 $25,000 annual scholarships to neurodivergent students pursuing visual arts, funded through a permanent endowment. Led by Thomas and Linda Whitaker, this initiative reflects the best of our community: care, commitment, and belief in every child's potential." The room stood, a full standing ovation. Thomas and Linda were both crying. My mother stared at the floor. The museum she had worked in for more than 2 decades was celebrating someone else's family, someone else's sacrifice, someone else's love. And everyone in that room understood exactly who had been missing from that story. 7:03 p.m. Reception Hall. I was accepting congratulations when my mother stepped beside me. "Denise, please, can we talk?" Her hand trembled. The wine in her glass shook. "We didn't know Ethan would. We didn't realize." I looked at her. Really looked at her. She looked older, smaller. For the first time in my life, uncertain. "Didn't realize what?" I asked quietly. "That he was talented, or that he was worth your time?" "We made a mistake." "You had 6 years to call, 6 years to visit, 6 years to ask how your grandson was doing. You didn't need to know he would sell a painting for $8 million. You just needed to care." "We do care." "You care now," I said evenly, "because it's convenient, because people are watching." Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, we want to fix this." "You can't. That time is gone. But you can let Thomas and Linda enjoy tonight. They earned it." My father joined us then. Calm voice, measured gestures. "Denise," he said, slipping into his professor tone, "I think we can all agree that emotions aside, this deserves a thoughtful discussion." "No, Dad," I replied. "We're done discussing." "That's unfair." January 12th, 2019. Subject line, housing request. 241 words explaining why you were too busy to help your widowed daughter and autistic grandson, signed with your credentials. His expression tightened. "I kept it," I continued. "Would you like me to read it aloud? I'm sure your colleagues would find it illuminating." His face went pale. 3 of his colleagues stood about 15 feet away, pretending not to listen. They were listening. Everyone was. My parents left at 7:14 p.m. I watched them walk out. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel revenge. Just peace. Thomas found me standing in front of the portrait. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I said. "I finally understand something." "What's that?" "I didn't lose my parents 6 years ago. I just stopped pretending I still had them." The reception continued until 9. 73 people personally congratulated Thomas and Linda. A reporter from public radio interviewed them for 12 minutes. They spoke about Ethan's talent, his way of seeing the world, the discipline behind his work. They never mentioned my parents. They didn't need to. December 25th, 2025, our first Christmas in the new house. The living room had 12-foot ceilings. We put up a 9-foot tree. Ethan arranged 14 wrapped gifts beneath it by paper color, darkest to lightest, left to right. At 10 a.m., he brought out 3 small canvases from the studio. "Grandma, Grandpa, Mom, I made you something." 3 abstract pieces, 8 by 10 inches each. "Our emotional signatures," he explained. Thomas's was steady blue layered with deep brown undertones, grounded, constant. Linda's was warm gold with thin silver highlights, bright, generous. Mine was green threaded with gray, growing, healing. "These are us," Ethan said simply. It was the most meaningful gift I had ever received. 7 of us sat down for Christmas dinner. Mrs. Ethan, Thomas, Linda, Claire, Margaret, Mrs. Patterson with her apple pie. We ate at 3 in the afternoon, at a real dining table, 8 feet long, with enough room for everyone. At dessert, I raised my glass. "This," I said, looking around the room, "is my family." Everyone lifted theirs. My phone rang twice during dinner, the same number both times. I didn't answer. After we cleared the plates, we walked out to the studio. Ethan had finished something that morning, something he hadn't shown anyone. "This one is called Home," he said. "It's not about a place. It's about people." The canvas was 60 by 80 inches, his largest yet. Warm gold, deep blue, steady green. And in the center, barely visible unless you stood close and really looked, 4 abstract forms overlapping. 2 taller shapes, 1 medium, 1 small. A family. That night, when I stepped back outside to throw away trash, I found an envelope tucked beneath the doormat. Handwritten address, no return label. 3 pages, my parents' handwriting. "Denise, we understand if you never forgive us. We were wrong. About Michael, about Ethan, about you. We are proud of Ethan. We are proud of the mother you have become. We are ashamed of the parents we were when you needed us most. We don't expect anything. We just needed you to know." The signature read, Mom and Dad. Not Jonathan Monroe, Ph.D., just Dad. I read it twice. Then I placed it in a drawer. Maybe one day I would answer. Maybe one day I would let them meet their grandson. Maybe. But not tonight. Tonight, I had everyone I needed. 9:47 p.m. I tucked Ethan into bed, something I hadn't done in years. He usually disliked physical contact, but tonight he didn't pull away. "Mom," he said softly, "I know Dad can't see this house, but I think he can see the colors from wherever he is. And I think he's happy we found Grandma and Grandpa." "I think so too," I whispered. "They're not the ones we were born with," he added. "They're the ones we get to keep." He closed his eyes. I sat there for a long time, listening to him breathe, thinking about how far we had come. 10:23 p.m. I stood on the front porch of 14 Harbor Lane and looked down the street toward Willow Street. the small house where we rebuilt our lives in 900 square feet. New renters were moving in January, a young couple. I hoped it would be as kind to them as it had been to us. My phone buzzed. A text from Claire. A collector wants to commission Ethan, offering $500,000. Should I tell them no? I smiled. Some things weren't for sale. Tell them thank you, I typed back, but his schedule is full. I looked up at the clear winter sky, 28 degrees, sharp stars. Somewhere, I like to believe Michael could see the colors too. Blood doesn't make a family. Showing up does. Ethan painted one more piece that year. He called it home. Blues and golds and greens layered until they glowed. The color of belonging. We didn't sell that one. We hung it in the living room, where everyone who walked through our door could see it. Because some things you keep forever. Not because they're worth money, but because they're worth everything. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. When my world collapsed, the people I expected to catch me stepped back. They chose convenience. They chose reputation. They chose themselves. And for a long time, I thought that meant I wasn't enough. But I learned something different. Love is not loud. It's consistent. It's breakfast at 7:15 every morning. It's building shelves in a cramped bedroom. It's driving 3 hours for a painting you don't fully understand just because your grandson made it. The people who stayed, who sacrificed quietly, who gave when they had little, they built the foundation my son now stands on. Success didn't heal the past. Money didn't rewrite history. What healed us was loyalty. What changed our lives was presence. You cannot force someone to value you, but you can choose who gets access to your life. And sometimes the family you keep is more powerful than the family you were born into. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to pause and think about the people who showed up for you when life was at its hardest. If you believe that family is defined by love, loyalty, and sacrifice, not just by blood, please like this video. It helps this story reach others who might need to hear it tonight. Share it with someone who stood by you, or someone who needs the reminder that they are not alone. Who stayed when it would have been easier to walk away? If you want more stories about resilience, quiet strength, and the kind of justice that sometimes the greatest comeback isn't revenge, it's building a life so full of love that the people who walked away no longer define it. Thank you for listening, for being here, and for being part of this community.